Hey, everybody. Welcome to Tech Bros Friday morning happy hour with Mary and Lauren. Lauren, you gave a talk last night in New York. It was a Women in Data event, I think.
Yeah, I gave a talk last night. Well, I want to step back for a second. What is this? What did you call it? Breakfast happy hour, morning happy hour?
Well, usually
Is that
in the copy I put out there, I make some joke about how this is happy hour, because
right, right, right.
Silicon Valley hour is at its 10 a.m. and on the
Yeah,
West
people always used to call this bankers hours, which meant like bankers don't work,
Coast.
which is true. But yeah, there's definitely a tech bro hours too. No, but I like that. Like it feels like we could pivot this and become like a morning show, like those morning zoo shows where we have guests on and they're giving crazy stories and whatever.
And
Uh,
people are listening on there. Well, there's no
yeah, yeah,
longer that thing of like listening to the radio or watching TV when you're heading out to work because no one heads out to work anymore. Among the
right, right.
privileged class that we dwell amongst of tech workers, right?
Sure. But yeah, no, I gave a talk last night at New York's Women in Data event. Yeah, it was great. A lot of people were talking about, the data teams, data engineers, analysts, like how to get a job and like are data teams like dead? And I don't know, my answer to all that is yes. Like a lot of this is dying off and we're repivoting and rebaselining on like what's important for companies, what is actually like, how do you actually get value out of these data teams? And yeah, it was a good talk. I had a chat. I was on a panel. It was me and someone named Liz, who runs a consultancy here in New York. She's great. We should have her on at one point. But it was a good talk. It was good to talk with people, and a lot of the narrative as well of what was being discussed was around like all these vendor tools and things that claim they do a thing and they might do it, but it comes at a high cost, and is it really worth it to do any of this? And I always love speaking at women in data events or things like that. There's a lot more grounding in reality, I think, with people who run budgets and are women and have to adhere to budgets and are held accountable to their spend and outcomes versus some of the Silicon Valley stuff, which is very like woo woo out up in the air. But it was a good talk.
And
Happy to
the
do it
type of
again.
audience
And
of people who don't take for granted that they're in this space, and that brings, as you said, a certain realism to it. The
yeah,
type of people, let's say, who maybe see beyond the data scams to get into today's topic, right?
yeah, right.
So we'll bring on our guest in just a minute. Bill Inmon probably doesn't need any introduction. Let's just specify first. Tell me what you mean by data scam, because I had a lot of people writing to me when they saw this show, obviously excited to talk about the topic, super excited the bill is coming on. But even I think among data and tech people, when you hear the term data scam, they tend to think of it immediately. They default to like as a private citizen, because we all have those kind of fears of like, being scammed because our data's been stolen or hacked or whatever. But that's not what we're
Yeah,
talking about
sure.
today. We're talking about data. Tell me what you mean by data scam.
Yeah, data scam, in my opinion, is anything that it's a range. So it's things that just don't work and are being sold as vaporware and have huge marketing budgets, and it's all woo-woo hypothetical. But if you actually use it and you actually like you're the first sucker to use it, it might not work. Or the second sucker to use it, and it might take a lot more headcount required than you'd thought, or it might have all these defaults in it, like this system or this technology or the software or whatever. That's on one end, and on the other end is just like, and people always claim that like we're in tech and like tech's always woo woo and kind of up in the air, and people talk a big game, and if you look and pick back what reality is, it's always less. And I agree with that, but I still think there's like some reality that needs to happen. So that's one end. And the other end is just outright like scams, like things that anyone can see as a scam. And like that goes from like boot camps that don't really exist or really teach you anything, all the way to like, someone who's building like, someone who has like a GitHub repo and they're out here like trying to get stars for their repo because they're trying to get some venture capitalist to like give them some money. And so they're out here playing this GitHub star repo game and, and everything in between. And I've worked in this space for a little over a decade. I know what is real and what isn't usually. And I think we're at like a
even when you're
we're in
not
a golden,
even when you're
oh, we're
not
in a
wearing the
golden,
tinfoil hat.
yeah, right. Well, I'm always metaphorically wearing the tinfoil hat, but like we're in a golden age of scams, and like people have written about that, like related to Wall Street, related to like all this crypto stuff, and buyer beware in a lot of this stuff, and a lot of the technology has been brought down to where like anyone can do it. Okay, yeah, anyone can use this SQL thing. Anyone can do whatever, make a pipeline, and there's upsides to that, but there's also downsides. So I think that like we're gonna have a good conversation, and anyone out there like listening, please leave comments. But yeah, happy to chat with Bill
and
Inmon.
we'll even open the floor as a town hall in the second half. But let's get Bill on, because I suspect he already has a lot of reactions to what you just laid out there as data scams. So hi Bill, welcome to Tech Bros. You are one of the OG ultimate Tech Bros, right?
Hello, Mary. Hello, Lauren. How are you today?
Doing great.
Excellent.
So we've got the U.S. covered. Lauren's in New York. I'm in L.A. And Bill, you're at your home base in Denver. For the few people who show up who maybe don't know who you are, do you want to just give us a quick background?
Well, sure. I'm typically known as the father of data warehouse, but I do data architecture as well. And I have a company, Forest Rim, that reads raw text and puts text into the form of a database.
Great. And towards the end of the show, we will talk about Forest Rim, because I'm dying to ask your thoughts, sort of given what's changed with ChatGPT and all that in the past few months. But first, let's get what do you think of what Lauren calls data scams?
Well, first off, I think there's different kinds of scams. There's Bernie Madoff scams that are wide and huge, and there are small street vendor scams get out there. And so the first distinction I make is that there are different kinds of scams. The second thing that I want to say is that our industry has had a long history of scams. We call them the silver bullet. And a vendor comes along and says, if you just buy my fill in the blank, then things are going to be all right. Some of the scams we've had in the past. And when we think about these, today we laugh at them. But I can remember when we were told that if we didn't use go-to statements in programming, everything was going to be okay. And I remember when we were told that we should develop programs without programmers. Now, I never understood that one. And I remember lots of other things that simply were scams. And
I want to hear more about that. Like how far back are we going when you're saying people were saying, let's do beginning. Because we would think of that as something more recent with no code and things like that. But you're saying that the no code nonsense goes back.
Oh, that goes back all the way back to the early 1960s, and our industry has been thirsting for the silver bullet, and vendors keep presenting us the silver bullet. Now, one thing, and I'm going to talk a few minutes about what I consider to be some scams. One thing about today's scams is there is an element of truth in some of the things that we're going to call scams. So I don't know if there's such thing as a partial scam, but I think we're going to be discussing that. Let me discuss my first one. I think that going to the cloud, the corporation after corporation has been sold that if you just go to the cloud, everything's going to be okay. And I want to counter that with what happens when you put a big mess on the cloud. What you end up with is a big mess on the cloud. Going to the cloud does not do anything magical for you when you do that. And yet corporation after corporation falls for it. And so now, having stated that, I think there are some real reasons for going to the cloud. But this bit about this dream of I go to the cloud and my problems are solved, that 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 just isn't going to happen. Now, another one that is and I hesitate to call this a scam, but I think it's being sold incorrectly, is Chat GPT. That yes, there are some really interesting things that come out, and it's very sexy. It's something that has a lot of potential, but the problem is, or one of the problems is, that Chat GPT looks at external data, not internal data to the corporation. And most corporations don't do much with external data. Now, some do, and if they do, then ChatGPT is going to be a wondrous tool for them. But in terms of understanding your own corporate problems, the trends that are going on in corporations, ChatGPT is not going to do that for you. And yet, from a standpoint of business value, the data that's the most valuable to the corporation is in internal data, not external data. And so, in that, now, I hesitate to call Chat GPT a scam because there really are some really interesting things that it can do and it's going to do. However, in terms of answering the question, where do I get business value? ChatGPT does not answer that question, and yet it's being sold as something another silver bullet. And so anyway, that's a little bit about scams.
No, that's excellent. I agree with the Chat GPT thing. Like, we'll see where this plays out in the next year, next 2 years, whether like companies are going to develop their own models and they're proprietary to the business, whether it's going to be these general, like, public data set models. We'll see what happens. But I'm also interested, like one of my personal favorite things to look at is like the idea of vaporware. And, for anyone in the audience who doesn't, know, like, there's different kinds of ware. There's hardware and there's software, right? But then there's also shelfware. Shelfware is when you buy something and it sits on a shelf. So a customer will buy, I don't know, a data catalog for $300,000 a year, and nobody ever uses it. And for 3 years it sits there. So now you've spent $900,000, and it's sat on the shelf. It's shelfware, right? But it works. It's fine, but you just never used it.
Which there's a lot of in a lot of companies.
Well, there's a lot of shelfware out there, but vaporware is one of my favorites out there. And vaporware is the idea that like, you have a big marketing budget, you talk a big game, market your product and sell it, but really there's either nothing there or maybe there's something there, but you have to spend a lot of headcount and a lot of your own team's time to get the value out of like what you were sold or what you thought you were buying. And so we see this everywhere. Data is especially bad. You see it in application engineering and systems engineering and everything like that as well. But I'm curious to hear from Bill, like, how can customers figure out, like, maybe during a POC or talking to the salespeople, like, how do you suss out what's real versus not, and whether something's vaporware, and how do you kind of figure that out as a buyer? Like, what are some like tips or methods?
Well, it depends. The main tool that people use, and this is a really crummy thing to do, is ask if their neighbor has already bought the technology. And if somebody has already bought the technology, that means it's okay. And in the long run, this attitude leads to mass market insanity. It leads to a bunch of lemmings jumping over the cliff. And uh, so, so, so the number one marketing tool people use is, well, hey, XYZ Corporation bought it. You don't want them getting ahead of you, so you need to buy it too. And it doesn't matter that XYZ Corporation doesn't do anything with it. It's the fact that they bought it that is okay. And frankly, that unfortunately the way most people buy things. However, for a new product, a new technology, there are such things as proof of concepts. Proof of concepts are where you take a sampling of data and show what it can do. And the vendors hate proof of concepts because it's more work, and work is a four-letter word. And so
That's a tech bro slogan. Work is a
Yeah,
four-letter
work is
word.
a four-letter word. Yeah, I like that.
well, it's true. And so proof of concepts are good, but the tried and true method is to go out, get a bunch of people to buy something. It doesn't matter whether it works or not, but as long as everybody is buying it, then everybody else is going to buy it. That's why we have marketing first and products and products second.
Yeah, no, I agree. And during a POC, and I've run these from both sides. Like, like, how do you stress test in a POC? Are you trying to push the vendor to the limits? Are you trying to see if they have good like customer service or sales or support during that process? Like, what are some ways that you can I don't know, stress test them during that process?
There's only so much you can do in a POC. A POC's purpose is to show that something works in terms of stress, in terms of finding the limits of it. You need to push it beyond the POC because there is a reasonable limit to how much a vendor can dedicate resources to doing one of these POCs. So stressing things out comes after the POC.
Got it. Got it.
I'm going to read some of the tips here recommended by Miko in the comments. She's got her guidebook on how to avoid vaporware. Talk to the product people, not marketing and sales. Smart. Ask if they use it internally, aka eat their own dog food. Obviously only works with some products. Do a pilot, preferably a free one. If you must buy it, do it in December to get the best discounts. Ultimately, no different than buying a car. And try to negotiate usage or consumption versus a license deal. So good practical tips there, Nico.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think another, anyone out there, feel free to leave some comments and we can, or questions, and we can get around to them. Bill, I hear your dogs there. I love reading your articles, Bill. Where at the end you always have the dogs in there.
They run the house, and I just live here.
That's excellent. But yeah, I think one thing that like a lot of in the last couple of years, there's been this whole bottoms up sales motion, and for any of our viewers out there, right? Like a lot of technology is sold top down, and what that means is that like it's sold to like a VP or a C-level person, possibly a director, depending on the org size. And there's a contract set up, it's negotiated, that's where the budget is, and then everyone's kind of mandated to use it, right? Like a lot of software is sold this way, tops down. Like the people signing the contracts are the ones like managing the people who actually use it day to day. But in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of what's called bottoms up, and we've seen the proliferation of that. And this is everything from like open source stuff that can be used to what's called PLG, product led growth, which is it can be open source, it can be pretty cheap to use. You put down a credit card, you're spending in the low thousands of dollars a year maximum. You're not necessarily spending hundreds of thousands just to get you using the product and get growth metrics for the vendor. Like, and I want to ask Bill here, like how can customers evaluate the true total cost of ownership of a lot of this free open source software? Because as we know, nothing's ever truly free, right? If you're running stuff on a consumption like utility model, like you might be using a free product, but like, well, if you're using it poorly, you're driving extra consumption and extra compute, or maybe you're throwing stuff into storage the wrong way, or like there's headcount costs. Like some of these open source products, not all of them, but some of them are very human capital intensive, right? You might need 2 or 3 people to be running this stuff, and 2 or 3 engineers might cost more for your business than buying a $100,000 contract and having them manage it for you. With this free open source stuff, this like bottoms up, venture capital led type of sales motion, like how can customers think about total cost of ownership? How can they think about like, what is this actually gonna mean for my business? And are we getting hosed? Like how should people be thinking about that?
Well, I hate to tell you this, but it's pretty much trial and error. That the people that are the smartest are the ones that have been burned the most. And for someone that's never bought anything, they are a sitting duck for the vendor. And so experience and getting burned is the best teacher. I wish that there were something better than that. I wish I could point you to something magical, but I'm not aware of anything that is.
Yeah, I'm not either. I mean, people will ask me like either professionally or just as a friend like about stuff, and I'll tell them my opinions on things, and I have very strong opinions on a lot of things, and don't shy away from calling stuff out. But yeah, there's not a good review website, there's not a good anything. Like there's software review websites, but people can just pay to get their product on there, and that's their business model.
Yep.
So I agree. Like there's not really a good review site, and maybe there are some good review resources, but eventually they get enough users reading them, they all sell out and become, the vendors pay them to get on there.
Yep.
But I want to see if we can get a little spicy. Like, if we're talking about scams, behind that is scam artists, right? Like, is there any, entity or company or person that needs to be called out? I mean, this is not a corporate show. we can say anything we want, right? As the scam
Mary,
artist behind some of this.
I heard an old saying, how can you tell when your vendor is lying? When their lips are moving. And vendors, there's a fine line between hype and lying. And sometimes hype is lying, sometimes it isn't. But vendors do hype. And in doing so, sometimes they exaggerate, sometimes they overstate, sometimes they do it and don't know that they're doing it. But it's a normal practice in our industry to sell this way, and it's been that way from day one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like, I look at the whole thing like people talk about like the word con artist, right? The con is confidence, right? You're a confidence artist, so you gain people's confidence, right? And when you have access to someone's data, and whether you're an individual employee at a company, or you're a consultant in services, or you're a product vendor, or whoever, no matter who you are, right? It's a game of confidence, because the whole reason you're investing in data is to, make more money, reactivate customers who have churned, know your customer better, mitigate risk, right? Like, these are all like very intimate parts of a business. And like data teams, data engineers, analysts, whoever, like, have this like peek behind the curtain and how the company really operates. And that's like a lot of trust to give away to somebody, or to an entity, or to an outside business. And because of that, like, there's all kinds of stuff that, gets sold. We're the, as Bill called it, the silver bullet, or we are, the solution for your problems. Like, it's the whole thing is a confidence game. And what I've always found is that just by like being honest and not lying to a customer, you just like set yourself apart. Like, I don't know, I could run a bigger firm than I want to, like, than I have now, but like, I keep it small on purpose because I'd rather focus on getting work done. If I hired a big team, I would be playing a margin game, and I'd just be selling 23-year-olds who learned the technology last week and billing them out for $300 an hour, right? Like, and I don't want to do that. So I don't know. Like, it's the whole thing is very interesting, but yeah, I don't know. That's all I have to say about it. It's a big confidence game, and people, have to have confidence in who they're investing in.
So if every product is potentially a scam, if every vendor is potentially lying, or most likely lying, because that's part of the game, then how do you, let's kind of flip it. How do you find the value?
Boy, I wish there were an easy answer for that. There's not.
I guess other than the trial and error to a certain extent that you said earlier.
I hate to say it, but trial and error. Try something and fail with it, and try again and keep trying till you don't fail. But Mary, I just don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. What about, and so Miko brings up a funny point here is, and like this is something Mary and I chatted about when putting this together, right? But Miko says, in my opinion, the biggest scam out there are the quadrant generating companies. And I can name a few, people who have quadrants out there and put people on quadrants. But it brings me to a point that, like, Mary and I were talking about before the show. Like, how much should people actually put value in industry analysts and venture capitalists and other people who make a lot of noise and control a narrative? Should people discount that entirely? Should they listen to some of it? Like, with these industry analysts and VCs, like, how should people, you know, take that with a grain of salt or evaluate it?
I have a suggestion, and I suggest that before you believe an industry analyst, you find out how much that industry analyst company is being paid by the people they're evaluating. I don't think I don't think most people know that these large companies pay the consultants in order for uh, their placement on these grids and charts. And so, in terms of honesty, I think it would be honest that as these people produce these evaluations, they also produce how much money is being paid by the vendor to get those evaluations. Uh, so you're absolutely right about the industry analysts uh, having a dark side. I unfortunately, and I'm not going to tell you the name, but I have some really ugly stories about that particular topic. But industry analysts are a lot of my friends are an industry analysts, and a lot of them are very bright people, but they are being paid on the side, and they don't tell people that they're being paid on the side.
Right.
As someone who's still relatively new to the tech world, it's just discovering sort of how, I'll say the names like Gartner and Forrester and how they work. It just seems so kind of backwards in a world of social media, in a world where we can get, world-class experts and get their real thoughts, like in forums like this, without frankly too much effort, that there's still a market for things like Gartner and Forrester, frankly, and that companies are paying tens and thousands and hundreds of dollars to be on the stupid quadrants. Like,
let me tell you a little story. In the beginning, there were no computers. In 1960, the computer was sprung upon the world. And in that point in time, there were exactly zero people that knew how to manage the computing profession. Or there was not one person was trained, had background, and so corporations did. They went around and kind of selected people. And well, you're an accountant. You look like you know about computers. You're going to be the manager. You're an engineer. Now, the worst case I ever heard, there was one person that was in charge of garbage collection that they made in charge of IT. I'm not kidding. There's actually a company that did that. And so here you have all of these people that have been randomly selected uh, with no background whatsoever for understanding and managing technology. And then technology started to grow like a weed in the corporation. And these people that were in charge that had no background, they just sat there. They didn't, and they knew they didn't have any background. So they were looking for somebody to okay the purchases that they made because they were making strategic decisions for the corporation. They had no background for understanding it. And that's where these consulting companies came from. That these consulting companies said, look, we have the expertise in these technologies. You ask us. And it's almost like a young child asking their parents' permission to buy something. And so that's how these consulting companies came to be, because they filled in the gap for the insecurity that these managers of technology had. Because not one technology manager had the background for being placed in the position that they had. So they needed confirmation that they were making good decisions. That's where Partner, Forrester, and a whole host of other ones came from, and and that's the position they filled in our industry.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And in looking at this over, the last couple of decades and how this all played out, and talking to a lot of people, who were around before my time, like yourself, Bill, and others, it's very interesting to see like that play out. And then now what we have are in this bottoms up version too is like social media influencers, like data influencers, and who knows who these people are, but they're, venture capital firms or vendors are paying them to, go out and promote their stuff consistently. And these are for a lot smaller deal sizes usually, or it's just open source stuff because they're trying to get as much traction as possible. And it's this, bringing it back to what I said earlier, like the confidence game of like, oh, I'm the expert. I know it. I know everything. And yeah, it's fun to watch it play out. And I like what Mary said as well. Like, how does this still go on? Well, it goes on because people want someone telling them they made the right decision, right? And that's why you see all this lemming behavior. Like, why did everyone adopt Hadoop 10 years ago? Like, well, it's because Google did it, right? Google did all this distributed system stuff, and then a couple of people left Google, and then they started their consulting firms, or they went to work at Cloudera, and they, Hadoop blew up. And did most companies ever need it? No, but Google did it, and now this other person seems smart, and they're talking about Hadoop. So why not? Let's try it. And then a lot of companies went down a 3 to 4 to 8 year path to nowhere doing this instead of, a lot of this could have been done in relational databases and a lot simpler. You don't need 5 different Apache open source projects plus Hadoop. So, it's all about confidence and who can present themselves with the best narrative there.
I just want to point out, I put the StreamYard link in the comments. If anybody wants to join live, this is your chance to ask Bill Inmon a question or just chat with him. As you can see, he's a pretty friendly guy, and your chance to talk directly to Lauren, of course. I must say, I'm relatively new to the space. I feel like super grateful that I know the two of you. And I think the reason I'm excited to have both of you on the show, and the idea behind today's show was Lauren, you wanted Bill on to talk specifically about this. But to me, what connects the two of you is that, both of you very different backgrounds, but you're two of the people who call out all of this marketing bullshit that's out there that most people aren't willing to say. And that, I think at the point of time we are in history and technology, a lot of that can change. A lot of those paradigms of the stupid quadrants and the rest of it, and maybe some of the toxicity now of what you're talking about with the influencers. Some of the influencers are legit, but most maybe aren't. I was a paid influencer for a while. I wasn't the most legit, frankly, but I don't know. I just think it's great that to have this conversation. I don't really have a question that I'm leading up to here. Just that I appreciate both of you being so frank about this.
Oh, I have a question for Bill, right? Like when you were doing the whole data warehouse, and coming up with, your definition of it, and data warehouse is this. It's not the data warehouse; it's data warehouse, and it's independent of technology, and coming up with your definitions and how things work. Like, you were seen as a contrarian back in the day, and now a lot of people say, oh, this is foundational, this is something that you should at least know and think about. But how did you kind of deal with being called a contrarian and people saying, oh, this guy, he doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's wrong, and he's just trying to sell a service or something? Like, how did you kind of as you were coming up and putting your ideas forward, kind of reconcile all that back in, when you were building all this?
Well, the truth is, it goes back to my mother and my father. My mother and father were the two most stubborn people that ever walked this earth. And I have stubbornness to a fault. You can ask my wife about that. But I'm a stubborn person. Now, you should see, and in fact, I've got a little file that I occasionally go back and look at. I have people tell me that I should never be allowed to speak in public, that I'm an anarchist, that I'm setting the industry back 25 years. And then I have other people that said things that I can't repeat here because the language they used was not appropriate language. But in the beginning, uh, I've always felt that anybody is entitled to their opinion. They're also entitled to be wrong, and 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 out of stubbornness, I I, I had a vision that I was trying to convey to them, and I always blame myself for them not understanding the vision. You know, I got to change the subject a little bit. Just this last weekend, I went to Berkshire Hathaway's conference in Omaha, and I got to
Hmm.
sit in the presence of Warren Buffett. And do you know why Warren Buffett is Warren Buffett? It's because he had a vision. He had a way of thinking that was contrarian to his way and age. And today we he's Warren. And so, in terms of having vision and stubbornness, uh, that's uh, that's how data warehouse. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the history of data warehouse. When we first started talking to data warehouse, technicians roundly hated data warehouse. The people that loved data warehouse were the marketing people, sales people, and finance people. But the
The business users.
technicians, and from a from a marketplace standpoint, there was one company in the world, Pactel Cellular, which is now part of McCaw Communications, but Pactel Cellular was in Orange County, and they started the first data warehouse. And what happened was they found out that they could attract and keep customers. Well, the other cellular companies said, "Oh my gosh, data that this Pactel Cellular has this thing called a data warehouse. We have to one too." So top management went down to the IT people and said, "We need to get a data warehouse." And of course, the IT people had no idea what a data warehouse was. Um, and then after the cellular companies adopted data warehousing, then Sam Walton wrote a book on Walmart and data warehousing. Well, data warehouse was mentioned in the book, but Walmart discovered that they could use a data warehouse. And once the cellular companies and Walmart started doing data warehousing, then it spread. Then you couldn't stop it. But it was The vendors, in particular, IBM, Oracle, Microsoft, SAP, all of those companies hated data warehouse and did whatever they could to stop it. And so today, I think it's ironical that those companies have made millions of dollars on data warehouse and have and hated it and resisted it from the very beginning. So anyway, that's a little bit about the early origins of data warehouse. And I've never minded being criticized. Even the ugly criticism, and I've certainly had my share. Uh,
Mhm.
I try to take away anything valuable, and even when somebody comes up and tells me that I'm full of baloney, I blame it on myself for not explaining it to them properly.
Right.
It's an incredible history, and again, I like to use the word contrarian, Lauren, because that's to a certain degree what Bill is, and that's what people call you, for better or worse. I'm going to bring in a couple of the guests who will introduce themselves and ask their questions or give their comments. First of all, Miko, and then I'm going to bring Joe as well. So Miko and Joe at the same time. Welcome to the show, both of
Hey.
you. Both
Joey's.
longtime Tech Bro viewers. Miko, why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself, and you've been running the comments over on the side. So
Oh, this got me emotional. Bill, what a treasure. Seriously, what a treasure. I couldn't help myself. I was trying and then I stopped and I just could not help myself. So good. So, two things I wanted to comment on, and I had a question for Bill. The first thing was, I try not to call names because I have friends, obviously, but the quadrant generating companies, Bill, like I don't know how you feel, but I feel like they are the beginning of this quackery. I feel like they empower both consulting companies and vendors. It's a pay to play model to be able to kind of give this enablement. I'm just going to buy BS and then blame it on those companies. I wanted to see if you felt that that was about correct. Without calling names. I didn't call names, but we can all
I'm,
know.
I'm the thing about those companies are there are some very smart people and very professional people that work for their companies. And once upon a time, those companies played a really important role because once upon a time, every IT manager had no background, and those
Right.
companies played an important and valuable role at that point in time. However, our profession is maturing, and the role that those companies play has changed. And I think that, and I hesitate to use the word quackery, but you use the word, so I'll use it. Um, they are struggling to uh, retain their position of influence in the industry.
Yeah, so then that builds on kind of my other comment. When I decided what jumped me to join is when you guys start talking about influencers. I think the influencer world is really interesting now because having run one of the top podcast analytics for a number of years, we never did sponsorship, and everybody wondered why. And it was because we had, all these companies coming to us, didn't know if the tools were good, and they wanted to pay us a boatload of money. Whereas now I'm beginning to see, unfortunately, like almost the same pay to play model you see with Gartner. It's the same thing you see with influencers now. I feel like this is Kim Kardashian and in the crypto market, right? And so I feel kind of bad because people are following these people and they're so excited. But how do you distinguish, right? Like, how do you distinguish in the influencer marketing arena, especially in data where it's more personable? We're not selling milkshakes with our butt, right? We're selling true product through thought leadership. In fitness, sorry, Joe. In fitness, everybody's selling a protein shake, right? So this is not the protein shake world. These are professionals. We're more down to earth, but nonetheless, people are on payroll. I've been one of those people. So how do you distinguish between who's being honest and who's on pay to play? Everybody has bills to pay, man.
you come
You
and watch
know,
the Tech Bro show, right?
it's almost, and I hate to say this, it's almost like who is your favorite movie star? Is it Tom Cruise? Is it Javier Bardem? Is it Russell Crowe? Is it Clark Gable? I don't know, but it's a matter of taste, and and that's a shame because the movie stars are are different kind of people. But in terms of which influence do you follow, well, who 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 do you like?
I'll say this on the influencer things. Like, you should do due diligence on a lot of these influencers as well. Like, I've seen a lot of people talking a big game and mentioning this product and that product. If you actually look at them, like, they haven't like worked in like 2 years, and they haven't like used the product in a business setting. And if you just kind of Google around who some of these people are, like, you use your head and be skeptical about someone who's telling you like, oh, hey, here's this new database, or hey, here's this new thing that's going to do all this other stuff. And, you look and, oh, well, they have, 0.25% of the company, or they're being paid $10,000 to promote this. Right. So, use your head. I don't know. If you're smart, you can tell who's smart and who isn't. So, use your head. But
Absolutely.
Joe's here as well.
Joe's
We
an
got
influencer,
Francesco
but
here
he's
as well.
legit.
Joe, what's going on, and what questions or comments do you have?
I just came to say hi. Can't get enough of Bill this week, so. But no, it's a good show. I think the influencer comment's interesting. I mean, I do find myself in that position once in a while, but I think it's a balancing act, right? I mean, you have to I think figure out what just where does your experience intersect with whatever you're asked to promote, right? And I think as long as you can tread that line, I think credibly, then you're fine. But you won't see me out there like I don't know, getting like endorsing BetterHelp or something like that. It's just not really something that I just have no experience in. It's like just something I wouldn't do. But yeah, it's definitely a balancing act. It's something I'm like personally super reluctant about too. I did never want to be where I am, but I am. So just you just deal with the hand you're dealt with. So yeah.
It's a tough life being a data influencer with a best-selling book, right?
Well, Joe, you at least wrote a book. Like, some of these people can't write more than a tweet, so they can't write more than the amount that fits in a tweet or whatever. And you've written a whole book, so
Bill's written like 60 of them, and I know Francesco.
Bill's written like a bunch of books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After Unified Store Schema book actually over here, so it's a good book. So. But
love it. Yeah, I know. Thanks for coming on, Joe, and you guys stay here, Joe and Miko. We're going to hear from Francesco. Introduce yourself, Francesco, in a minute, and then I want to take a couple minutes. I know we're close to the hour, but if Bill can stay, because we want to talk about his company, Forest Rim, a little bit. But Francesco, welcome to the.
Hello, everybody. I am Italian and I speak with Italian accent. I hope you don't mind it.
Love it.
Excellent.
Joking. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Mary, for hosting this. Well, actually, I just wanted to say hello. And because we are talking about data scam, I think it would make sense also to talk about what is not a data scam. So also like to make it a nicer ending. So we were sort of laughing about all this sellers of dreams. Now let's talk about what we don't consider a data scam, but actually a good technology, something to follow. For example, now I'm doing some research about semantic layer, and there's a lot out there about headless BI and stuff like that. So I need to see, to find what is a good product, what is a good solution, and I hope, I give the word back to Bill and everyone to answer this. Thank you.
Did you want to go for that, Bill? That's obviously the big question, right?
Well, I would say I'll answer that. Like, what is not like? So everything in life is a scam if you let it be a scam, right? Like, if you like go crazy on, Databricks or Snowflake or Google Cloud Platform, and you hire, a consulting firm to come in there and go crazy on stuff, like, they're making money off of you, and you're left with these exponentially increasing, cash flows of pipelines that cost, $100,000 this year, but with, the way the cloud works, next year it'll cost you 200,000 because your volume increases and you're not doing your joins correctly, or not, considering cardinality in the joins, and all kinds of things. And I think the best way to avoid scams, or what isn't a scam, is to think about the architecture of systems, and think about who's going to be working on your project. And the more you can consider total cost of ownership, and the more you can consider, like, what value are you getting out of the project, or the platform, or whatever you want to call it, and delivering that in like a cost efficient way, like, that produces value, whether you're making dashboards or you're making, like, ML powered, like, rec systems or workflows. Like the smarter you can be about architecture, the better you can be about any of this stuff. So, even though a lot of things out there can turn into scams if you're not careful or you're not smart, going back to what Bill said earlier, the more you've, been burned in your career or seen other people burned, and the more you know about the systems you're working with and how they make money off you, whether that's a pricing model, or like what that seats, or whether that's a pricing model that's, usage based, whatever, you'll be able to figure out, like, what works for you, because ultimately all these vendors are, just vendors at the end of the day, and you don't work for them, you work for your company. Your company pays your paycheck, so you have to do right by your company.
Lauren, I get back to my previous statement. How can you tell when a vendor is lying? When their lips are moving.
Yep. And Bill, to bring it back, like, both you and I are vendors. Joe's a vendor, Miko's a vendor, Francesca, I don't know where you work, but Mary's a vendor too. So we're all moving our lips now. So I guess we're all lying here as well. But I want to bring it back to, as we wrap up the show here. Tell us what you're doing with Forest Rim, where you're at now, and, where people can find you, and what you're working on.
Well, we are in Denver, Colorado. We have offices all over the world. We take raw text, turn it into a database. And once you do that, you can do all kinds of interesting things. We can read medical records and do analysis on medicine. We can read the internet and find the sentiment. We can listen to call center conversations and convert the call center into something that's useful. Those are the kinds of things that we're doing.
And just quickly on that, Bill, given that Forest Rim is text analytics, has the rise of ChatGPT and the growing public awareness of language models and the value of language and text data, has that changed things for Forest Rim or not in the specific market that you're selling to?
It has confused the marketplace to some extent, but when you bring up the subject that ChatGPT looks at external data and we look at internal data, it actually opens doors for us. But you have to make that distinction.
Yeah, it's going to have to be another show. Francesco's question is going to have to be another show. And I would end on saying, for anyone who's looking to avoid scams, look to some of the people on the screen. Like Miko's been doing this stuff for 20 years and has been also calling out the bullshit. Joe is built his name, one of the few influencers who built his name on that hard work. Francesco, I don't know you too well, but Bill has recommended you for a long time. So I trust that you're also in that boat. And of course, always look to Lauren and Bill and the Tech Bro Show when you're looking to avoid getting scammed in the data vendor world. Lauren or Bill or anyone else who wants to have the last word.
Without
Bill,
moving
you
your
have the
lips.
last word.
Francesco first, then Bill.
I'm fine.
No, I'm just suggesting whoever speaks, speak without moving your lips.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know sign language. So.
Yeah. Well, Bill, thanks for being on. I always love follow Bill Inmon. He posts great stuff on LinkedIn. Most of his articles end with a little sentence or two about what his dog's up to. After he's taking down billion-dollar corporations, then you can read at the end a little sentence or two about what his dog's doing, which I always love. And one of the leaders in the space for years. Thanks for being on, Bill. Thanks, Miko, Joe, Francesco for joining. And that's our show for the week.
Awesome.
Thank you,
everybody.
Thanks to everyone in the comments. We see you. Yeah.
Yeah. Those
Take
dogs
care,
are
everybody.
awesome.
Bye, guys. Thank you. This is awesome. Bye.